what to do. You, Susan. Good afternoon. Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And today we are holding a memorial for the 9/11 victims and everybody who was involved in helping them during and especially after. And today we have on Jeanne White as a co-host and Betsy Wurzel. Ladies.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Lillian. Hi, Jeanne.
Hi. So, where was everyone on 9/11? Where were you all?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
I was from Cape Cod on vacation.
I was home, actually. I remember that day as clear as can be. I was getting ready to leave. Matt called me from work. He said, "Did you put on the TV yet?" And I said, "No." He said, "There's been a plane went through, a plane accident, the World Trade Center." So I put the TV on, and then I saw the other plane go through. And I said, "Matt, that's no accident. That's intentional." I live in New Jersey, and I live right by, not too far from Staten Island. So the next town, a couple of towns over, we went down to the waterfront. Matt, they left early, and you could see the smoke from the World Trade Center building from across the river. And it was very devastating in the area I live in because a lot of people were killed that were from New Jersey. And it was really frightening. Matt's coworker lost a son-in-law there. We knew someone that was there, and he made it out alive. And I remember Matt was really concerned about Jack, our friend, and he tried calling him, and then Jack got a hold of Matt. So today I was thinking of Matt too, and how concerned he was for other people.
Really? It's amazing. Where were you, Lillian?
I was up in Cape Cod vacationing, and we wanted to turn on the news station to find out what the weather was going to be like for the day. So we saw the two planes going right into the World Trade Center. And my past husband, who has since died, said, "Oh my God, it's not a TV drama program. This is really happening." And it was just awful. I mean, I heard from my son, and he decided not to go to work that day. His wife had a friend who worked in that building, saw the planes coming, and decided he wanted to get a better view. So he went up to the roof to take a look at what was happening. So he was wiped out when the plane, of course, went into the tower. And they were upset because they had been married 3 days earlier. They got married on September 8th. And so they decided to postpone their honeymoon.
Yeah, right. I was just
for a
like,
while.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, my husband was sent to Japan. And his company says, "We don't care whether you're afraid or not, you're going to get on that plane because we need a rep out there." So he flew to Japan 2 days after the bombings. And I have to give him a lot of credit. He did it, even though I'm sure that he was upset. Good afternoon, Brian. How are you?
I am well. How are you? Thank you for the invite.
Oh, you're very much welcome.
Mhm.
We wanted to welcome anybody and everybody who wanted to say a few words to remember the fallen on 9/11, because like what happened in World War II and the atrocities that took place there in Vietnam and the Korean War, people have a tendency to forget. And this is the kind of thing that needs to be remembered, so it won't be repeated.
Agree. Brian, a little bit about yourself. Where were you that day?
Well, on that day, in September 11th of 2001, I was in the Central European nation of Republic, rather, of Georgia, which they recently was just recently part of the Soviet Union until 1989. I was asked to go there with a federal agency to train transparency in publishing, and I was that when it happened was in the morning here in the U.S., but it was 6 o'clock at night in Central Europe. Two of my people that I was there working with came running into the room and said, "You must come, you must come." And we went over and watched everything on CNN Worldwide and watched what was happening. And of course, all of the folks I was working with, these former communists, were so struck by what was happening, and they were all extending their sympathy to me. And I said, "Well, it's not me that you should be extending sympathy to. It's the people who were in that building and in those airplanes."
Right.
Yeah, so that's where I was. And then we watched for the rest of the night. I remember distinctly a British guy and a Danish guy who I'd met there. We were in his apartment, in the British guy's apartment, and we were just watching this. And nobody could understand. Of course, we couldn't. It was as you were in this country at noon that day. Nobody could understand what was happening. It was just such shock and such trauma. But it was the beginning of a new world order, and it's being manifested today. So, yeah, we should. I hope that we do remember what happened, and I hope we always remember what happened. And it could happen again anywhere. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to be a whole lot more accepting as a nation and as people to ensure that things like this don't happen. And by the way, my background also is I'm retired United States Army. I'm a retired sergeant major, so I have a fair amount of a lot of years under my head anyway. I have hair, but there is no hair. I've had a lot of years of experience in certain things.
I myself was in Italy at the time.
Were you?
Yeah, and and I believe we were in a monastery when someone out of the group came up to all of us and said, at that time he was saying they were bombing America.
Yes.
And so everyone panicked, really. And then from then on, it was utter chaos for the Americans, but at least we were aware of in Italy. And 3/4 of the people that were on the tour with me at that time, were from New York City. And so it was exceptionally devastating for them also because they could not get out and make a phone call. Right. Like none of us could make phone calls.
None of us, that's right.
But I have to tell you that one of the things I do remember is that once we got back to near the hotel, all the storekeepers and everything coming out of their stores, absolutely crying and waving the American flag. It was very emotional, really was.
Yeah.
And scary. Because the first thing they told the men on our tour was, take off your baseball caps. And don't tell anyone that you're American right now. Just don't open your mouth, basically. And then from then on for the next 3 or 4 days, it was utter chaos.
Yeah.
Other than that, but it was a memory I won't forget. That's for damn sure. But we did listen to, first thing we all did when we came back to our rooms was that we listened to CNN also. Yeah. Every time we went out, we'd come back home and we'd be back to the rooms and we'd turn on to see what was happening, So it was kind of a strange emotion for me because I felt a little bit detached from it because I was not there, So I had the emotions, but it just didn't seem real for us. But a lot of us all experienced that, saying even the people from New York City said the same thing, that we felt ugly, like it was happening someplace else, and that was it. It would be like for us now looking at something drastic that happened in Europe like 2 days ago. You wouldn't have that same feeling. It was kind of really feeling sad. It was very sad, though, but scary at the same time because, like, if we went into St. Mark, the square there, every corner had a trooper there with these huge, and I mean huge guns. That's something you never experienced before, So it was open eye for us, really. you know. But the Italian people were just truly unbelievable. You know, telling you, come in, have something to eat here, don't worry about the money, do whatever it was just amazing how kind and considerate they were. Mm-hmm. So that was my experience for 9/11.
We haven't been invaded since 1942 when the Japanese dropped the bombs on Pearl Harbor.
41.
41, thank you very much. Yeah. And I think as a country, we aren't used to the idea that somebody from the outside would ever figure out a way to come on in and do serious harm to us. And when we found out that it was box cutters, I know a lot of people hit their heads because it never occurred to them that that could become a weapon of terror.
Right.
And so as a result, it really did make us look inadequate, almost unprepared, that something or somebody would dare to come and do something to us. But I don't think it will happen again because this time around we're a little more aware of what's going on from the outside. It's the inside that I sort of worry about with all the terrorist groups and their weaponry and their various hates and what they could do should they be turned loose or in colors to go out into the streets. I don't know about you, but I wasn't too happy when I walked through the airports and there were armed soldiers standing on every corner of the airport with their semi-automatics poised for action. I mean, I'm used to seeing troop movement during the 50s when I lived in Long Island, and they were moving troops around there, and you would see them in their trucks, and you would see them in their tanks, and you would see them in the Jeeps and everything else, and they made a big show of making sure you saw it. But they don't do that anymore. And when they do move troops around, you don't see them. They sort of blend in, which in some ways I think is a shame. I think people ought to be reminded that we do have a standing military around to protect us should the need occur.
Totally agree. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing, you know, but it can happen anytime again. It's just, history always repeats itself at some point.
I think that's a great point, Jeanne. I think we do have to be, I don't want anybody to be hyper vigilant, although right. I tend to be personally, but I don't want anybody else to be. However, your point is that we do not learn from the past. No. Had we learned from the past, you know, Lillian, you talk about what could happen to us. Look at what's happening to us right now with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
this happened before.
Our taking away of civil liberties.
This happened before in 1918.
Right.
Yes.
And it happened before then. It happened in the 13th century. We just don't learn anything. We're not very smart people when it comes down to looking at what happened in the past and saying, gee, could that happen again? The answer is yes, it could.
Yes, it can.
And we should adopt and embrace not a hyper-vigilant, but we should embrace a vigilant sort of outlook on life. And we should be aware of these things, and we should have plans for what's going to happen and how we're going to respond to it, in my judgment.
Right. That's exactly how they cannot respond to the pandemic in the hospitals and so forth.
Precisely.
They were not prepared for it. They didn't think it was going to happen. But in actuality, you know, it does.
It does. And in 2005, I didn't mean to jump on. In 2005, we had a national pandemic plan. We had a plan that was built.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we conveniently forgot it. And, you know, I would just say this is a military thing as well. I shouldn't even talk about this. What we do in a peacetime military, that is when you're not actively engaged in combat, your role is just like a firefighter, or, you know, you're to be prepared for these things when they do happen. We frequently practiced a plan for what would happen if somebody flew a plane into the Pentagon.
That's right. Yes.
We did. We actually practiced for this. And
I'm sure
we had a plan for it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure they still do that now, though. Really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, but our officials think otherwise. They say, "Oh no, how can that happen again? And how could a pandemic actually closed down a country or countries, the world, which it did. So we just don't learn from it, and I doubt we'll ever will.
No, I don't. You're probably right, because the human spirit always sees the bright part of life. And
yes, agree. Yes, definitely agree on that. Has anyone ever been to the museum in New York?
Not yet.
I do.
It's absolutely. It really is the I forget what they call the pool there, the fountains, with all the names are inscribed in steel on at the end of each part of the pool. But then when you go inside, it's actually you're reliving it. People were crying and everything because you could hear all these radio reporters talking and airports jumping in saying, bring these planes down and all this kind of stuff, So it was kind of very emotional. We saw the steps that people used to escape there, and basically all the pictures and all the artifact that they have there. It's quite an experience, and I would suggest anyone, if they had an opportunity is to go there, because it's captured in a world of love, really, for all the people that were lost there. It was it got to the point that we had to leave because it became very, very emotional and hard to watch and to be part of it, because you felt like you would somehow people were feeling that they were there again, But it was quite a museum. I'd suggest everyone take it. I think young kids should be taken there too to see what happens. That life isn't daffodils. There are things that happen to people. But the quilts that women made from the South, they were just hanging up on walls and stuff. They were beautiful. The pictures that they had there, and there were a lot of pictures of the firefighters there. So it was quite an interesting weekend for us when we went there. Very busy there, and extremely at that point too. There was a lot of security there also at that time. So I think that's great. Does anyone else have anything to say other than that?
Yes, Jeannie. What I have to say is that people have to remember 9/11, why it happened, and people are still dying from the result of 9/11.
Yes.
From cancer and respiratory illnesses. And, it's really sad that even 19 years after, that people are dying. Yeah. And they should be recognized also. And I just want to thank all the people who were there, that survived, that helped people.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree. I mean, from what we could see when we were back and I was in Italy, you could see that CNN was showing how there were groups that were gathering together to help families and just to go and to be there and to help out any way they can. It was very emotional to see the influx of people that wanted to help.
It makes a difference, yeah. And I think it's that we need to remember the firemen and the policemen and any other civil workers that are out there, because now they are being affected. And the government really isn't that forthcoming about taking care of these people, especially the ones who absorbed all the smoke and is now developing cancer and other type of chronic inflammatory illnesses. And they're actually challenging these people and saying, are you sure it's from 9/11, or is it something that you had before, or is it something it's after, therefore? Yeah. And people have to remember it's not just during the bombing, but the aftermath. There are a lot of people that has PTSD from it. Right. That they reenacting the fact that happened, and maybe a building collapsed and they had to crawl out from an airspace. So some things like this really do need to be mentioned and to point out that this was not a TV show. The people couldn't come back to life and jump back to their feet and say, here we are. That was just the way they wrote our characters. I think people have to recognize it as a reality.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I agree. And I was just amazed. I almost feel like, I don't know, Brian, if you heard this, but because of this pandemic and all the issues that the medical community had with masks and the M3 and the face mask, all kinds of equipment. So now if way down the road now, some of these nurses and doctors and so forth get sick, they're going to have the same problems that the people had during 9/11. It making people feel like, oh, you must have had this before. It's like revisiting again.
Yeah.
Really, that's how I think.
We're going to. You're all exactly right. I think we're going to see, as an old guy, I admit I'm an old guy. I've been in Vietnam a long time ago, before you guys were born, perhaps. But
nice try.
There you go, Brian.
we as a nation do tend to forget. We forget a lot of things. We forget the promises we made to the Vietnam veterans.
Oh, yeah.
We forget the promises we made to the World War II veterans.
That's
we
right.
forget the promises we made at 9/11. We're going to forget.
Yeah.
And we're going to blame people of being, greedy or something like that. No, actually, many of these things don't occur. They don't manifest until years down the road. I just was with an old Vietnam friend of mine 2 days ago, and we both can't believe we're this old. We just can't believe that it's been so long.
Oh my God, what happened?
I know you. This is not me. This is not me.
I hope not to blink.
But there's a book that I read once. It's called "We Were Soldiers Young and Once." Or "We Were Soldiers Once and Young," and we still see that. We still see the youth, but we're not youths anymore.
That's
and
right.
all those things that happened then become compounded now as you reach late 70s, like where I am. They just are worse. That's all. And that will happen, as you said. That will happen. I have so many friends, because of what I have done in my life, so many friends who were in the rescue and reclamation of 9/11. They were based in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and were trekking over every day. And for them, the same thing is true. They were exposed to noxious chemicals for weeks, as were the people who lived there around Lower Manhattan. Again, but we will forget as a nation, because we tend to forget. And from my perspective, and it's horrible, and I won't even do it, but we tend to want to politicize everything.
Totally agree. Yes.
I'm so I'm dismayed and distraught that we're politicizing today in Shanksville as well.
Yes.
Where you have two presidential candidates zooming into Shanksville. I don't know if you've ever been out there. It's in remote part of western Pennsylvania.
Oh, there's a real place?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Always exists. I found it on the map.
I thought it was like a figment. Like it was like a fantasy. I never heard that before.
I used to live in Johnstown, which is right up over the hill from Shanksville.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it does. And we're politicizing it. And I guess I must be turning into my dad, and I just get really upset about the politicization.
I think we all turn into our parents at some point in time. We really do. We may not want to, but we do. I think it's part of our DNA, I think. But
I think
today, how many people are going to remember 9/11 today? Really?
Well, and I could ask that. How many people remember Pearl Harbor? There's a wonderful tribute in Pearl Harbor. But, the average American goes to Hawaii, doesn't even think about going to Pearl Harbor to visit the battlefield or the Battleship Memorial.
Battleship Memorial, yeah. I bet they'll remember, well, one time there used to be a lot of movies.
Yes.
Of Pearl Harbor, so that may be a group of people that would remember it. But now I really don't know. But for 9/11, what happened? What happens, does anyone ever go and find out? What are these people doing? The families, what are they doing now? How are they existing with a loved one gone under those circumstances? Does anyone ever talk with them? I mean, that's something we probably should think about for our station. Lillian,
yes, or their children, because their children are caught up, either fatherless or motherless, or they were exposed to something that their parents had. You don't know.
So
and things are very, very quiet. The only time you hear their names is every 9/11, and it's a political thing. They get up there, they say a name, and they ring a bell, and there's a shot of the president saying, "Oh, I'm such a good person. Look what I'm doing. Don't you think I'm great?" And then they go back to ringing the bell for each one of the people who have died.
Right.
And I really think it has nothing to do with the president of the United States or the Congress or the Senate. It has about the people, the everyday people who got caught.
Those families and
those families.
And how are they surviving? I think that would be kind of interesting to find out more about that. Look, and I'm still on the suffragettes, Lillian, so.
That's okay. We can put that under the suffragettes and work on them. And, because I think it's interesting. It is 20 years. So in 20 years' time, these people are a lot older. Their children by now have probably turned into adults.
Right.
And you have to wonder whether these children are passing down the torch from what happened to them to their own kids.
Yeah.
Or talking to schools about what happened.
Right.
Because that's where it really needs to go. This type of history really needs to be taught in schools. That even though you're a big, powerful country, a third world country can always find a way to come in
and destroy. Yeah.
And destroy.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't sit there on your mountain and pretend that you're beyond the reach, because you're not.
No. I just don't think people are thinking about, there's so much going on right now with the pandemic. People are wrapped up in a lot of things, but this is still part of history and it will revisit itself again,
Mm-hmm.
I think, but I just go out for the families, and maybe we should have put out something a long time ago that we wanted to bring the families in once, some of them just to say hello and how are you doing,
Well, we can do an aftermath, just like there was an aftermath to 9/11.
Yeah.
We can do an aftermath. I think that they may not want to be recognized and
That's
stay
true.
at the limelight, but I think that we should at least try and find out and see how they're coping. I know in my son's family, they do not talk about the young man who was so curious to find out what's going on. I know they remember him on his birthday. They light a candle and stuff, but I don't know what else they do. And they may have a tradition for honoring their dead. Every culture does.
That's true. And don't forget, at one time, too, for Labor Day or something, remember there used to be like the 4th of July parades and stuff that, and because of the pandemic, that is all dispersed. We don't do that. So there's a lot of things that you tend to forget now even more. So,
yeah.
I don't know if there's an easy answer to it, but I think just us, I don't care if it's just the four of us talking, this is going to go out to everyone and everyone's going to hear it and know.
Everyone's going to hear it. And I want you to know, Brian, that for 3 months in a row, YouTube has congratulated us for having people on our 2 websites for more than 23 hours straight listening to our programs.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. It used to be you'd be hearing more about the 9/11 on television, but has anyone really heard anything about 9/11? Nothing.
I was just going to ask you.
I haven't seen anything, and I know they used to celebrate it with the symphony. They had it on PBS.
Yeah.
They had a lot of other programs, but I haven't been on TV this morning, so I don't know. I haven't really heard anything from radio programs.
No, nothing
that I'm aware of.
Have you, Betsy?
Yes, I haven't turned my TV on, but I know radio stations here in New York definitely were telling stories of what the reporters went through, what they experienced.
Yeah, that's good to know, really.
I just looked at my other screen. I watch a couple of computer screens all the time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to look at my morning paper again. Was there anything in your morning paper on page 1 today about?
Let me look. I have my paper right here.
I didn't see anything on the Washington
Or maybe you're too
Post.
young, you don't read newspapers anymore.
Well,
Yes.
I get the Washington Post, and I read it, and I usually have news breaking things, but there was nothing news breaking appearing on 9/11 this morning.
Right, yeah.
And I was kind of surprised because that's a pretty big newspaper. Oh, Betsy's holding something up.
Yeah, this is can I say the name of the paper?
Yeah, the Newark Star Ledger.
the Star Ledger, Day of Remembrance altered. Now, I didn't read the article because I didn't have time yet. But they always have Round Zero responder. They have a story.
Good.
They also, in my Home News Tribune, why New Jersey is part of the 9/11 mystery.
Good.
A lot of people, as I said earlier, were killed that were from New Jersey.
Yes.
There's a lot of monuments all over. And it was really frightening. And I wondered, you were talking about Pearl Harbor and remembering Pearl Harbor. Well, I grew up with my dad, who was a World War II vet in the Navy. But when Josh went to school, now my son is 36, they don't really teach history like they used to when we were going to school. There was a small article, I couldn't forget it, of Pearl Harbor, very small article. He didn't know Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
He didn't know about the Holocaust. I had to teach him. They don't teach.
No.
I don't know what they teach these days, but they certainly weren't teaching it when Josh was in school.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in my paper in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, there's a little bleep in the lower part of page 1 that says the virus changes 9/11. That's all it said.
Really? How does it change it?
Well,
I mean, we're still isolated. Well, I am.
Yeah,
see, we're not allowed to have people come into my house. We're still only allowed 10 minutes worth of viewing on the TV Burke's grounds. Yeah. And when we go out, we have to go through disinfecting whatever. By the time we're finished with the showers and the cleaning our hands and getting rid of the plastic and washing all the articles you buy at the supermarket and putting your gloves in the washing machine, putting your mask in the washing machine, putting yourself in the washing machine.
There you go. Like my newspaper has here, well, the Boston Globe says U.S. remembers 9/11 as pandemic changes.
There you go. Right.
Again, is that a cop-out or what?
Yeah.
It is a cop-out because yes, the pandemic is here. We're all existing. We're all watching the news.
Right.
We're all listening to the radio. So what does the pandemic have to do with the tradition?
Well, the thing is, maybe they should put out the flag the way they put out the flag when the towers were struck. Everybody put out a USA flag. Every single person in this country. And you don't even see that.
Right. So at any
point, sad.
I agree. So now the pandemic is going to be in forefront for everyone, except if there's anything else going on. Well, you know what, folks? It's the pandemic only, really, when you think about it. What do you think, Brian?
Well, another part of my life, I used to train emergency preparedness. And I would remind people that even though it can be the worst thing in the world, like it could be a tsunami and then the eradication of a nuclear plant, regular life goes on. People have babies.
That's right.
People get sick. So there's a whole lot of what we used to call what we still call it, the cascading events. We have to attend to the everyday part of life.
Yeah.
When tornadoes come through the South, regular things happen.
Right.
People cut themselves cutting a salad or something like that, and and people make babies and all sorts of things like that. So we have to be prepared for lots of things.
Right.
And curiously, September 11th of 2001 reactivated the National Incident Management System, which we now embrace, and we're supposed to in every part of this country, to respond to any critical incident. And the pandemic is a critical incident. It's identified as one of the 13 national planning scenarios. But we didn't have a concentrated response mechanism until September 11, 2001. You do remember that right after that, the president installed a guy named Tom Ridge as the first Secretary of Homeland Security, which didn't exist then either. Tom Ridge was a former Marine, and Tom Ridge instituted what we in the military. There's another Marine who just joined us. Hi, Bob.
Oh, hi, Bob. How are you?
Hello.
I finally found him. I'm sorry, Bob. I wasn't paying attention. My apologies.
You got a lot to do there. You got a lot of balls in the air. No worries.
I'm glad you're joining us.
So Tom Ridge reached out to his military training and brought in the operational procedures that those of us in the military have used for a long time. Mm-hmm. And firefighters have used it for a long time in the West, in the wildland fires. So that's when we started doing all of this in 2000, and as a result of September 11, 2001, because we had a failed response in New York, frankly.
Yeah, very failed. True.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bob, do you have anything to talk about what you were doing on 9/11? Or?
Well, it's hard to believe. I mean, I think for some of us, maybe we remember what happened, where we were when we heard about the Kennedy assassination. But I think 9/11 made veterans out of everybody. And I had 3 tours in Vietnam. My dad and uncle were on Iwo Jima, and my grandfather was over in World War I. So it's kind of a tradition. And in 1967, when I graduated, I was 17. Wasn't going to college. We certainly have any money for that anyway. And I wasn't going to risk being drafted and being a foxhole with somebody who was made to be there. So, the Marines were just the choice, but, they gave as good as they got. And that was that. But no, I think 9/11, it was very touching to see so many American flags flying after that. Mm. And I don't think there was any politician or corporate leader or movie star that said, "Hey, let's all put our flags out." I think it just happened very serendipitously, and people did it because it was unity. And I've always thought that politics stopped at the water's edge, and no matter who's in the White House, if you don't respect the person, you still respect the institution and the position. And I was down last year before all this happened. I was on a vacation, and I had a service T-shirt on, and somebody came up and they were railing against the current president, and they were asking me, "Well, should we do this? Should we do that?" I said, well, if I'm in the Marines, the last time I checked, when I raised my hand at Parris Island, South Carolina, I took an oath, and when I got out, the oath didn't go out with me. So you've got an obligation there, and we may not all agree on a lot of what's happening in the world, but we are one country, and I remember Khrushchev saying, "We're not going to have to attack you. You're going to break yourselves down from within." And people need to pay attention to that kind of thinking, because it's true.
Yes, it is. Agree with you, Bob. Yes.
It just makes me sad when people won't stand for the flag. Yeah, there's a lot of inequities in America, and it's not perfect, but I don't see anybody getting shot trying to leave either.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. People take their rights for granted, like they're privileged. They're born into this country, therefore they have all these civil liberties. But the problem is that somebody has to go out and ensure that these civil liberties are kept.
Yep. It sure can't.
Somebody's going to have to die for it.
Well, you win by making the other guy die for his, but there's except for ending some communism, some fascism, some slavery, war really hasn't accomplished a whole lot, but it sure did those things.
Yes.
And I've always said, my wife's a retired English teacher, but I've always said, if you can read, thank a teacher. If you can read in English, thank a vet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because they're giving their lives for something that they truly believe in.
Well, at least they're willing to willing to put their hand on the anvil for it, because not everybody that puts on a uniform, in fact, a very small portion of people that put on a uniform ever get the, if I can use the word strangely, never get the privilege of combat. But it takes 7 people to keep one Marine in the field for a day. I mean, it's a big institution, but I think we need to. It's constant vigilance out there, and there's enemies foreign and domestic, and we even some of my Vietnam buddies that the few that we have living still, we disagree dramatically on many things, but it still comes down to it's our country, and we took an oath, and nobody relieved us of that oath when we got out. I mean, we always say that we're not we're former active duty, temporarily unassigned.
My grandfather served in World War I and World War II. He was provost marshal of the Philippines, but he was also head security for the Manhattan Project.
Good heavens.
And he died drowning in his lungs from getting bullets received in World War I and World War II. He was a big guy. It was hard to miss. He was over 6'6", so all they had to do was raise their gun, and they would find some part of his body to appear.
Well,
he was a self-made man. He went in as a grunt, and he landed up as a lieutenant colonel. So,
well, yeah, that's a real accomplishment. I just think that 9/11 it made veterans out of everybody. I remember when who was it? Alexander Haig got on because obviously the president was in the air, the vice president was somewhere else, and Alexander Haig got on the TV and said, "Don't worry, I'm in charge. We have our hand on," and people were railing against him for that. Well, that's exactly what we needed, was somebody to, quote, be in charge.
Yeah.
So
that's just like what happened in New York, in charge.
Yeah.
When there was no one out. I forget the gentleman that became the face of New York. Do you remember him, who took over everything?
Was that Rudy Giuliani?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Yes. And he came in and he took over because no one else was going to stand up. So it's the same thing, you were just talking about that, At that moment, somebody had to be in charge because the president wasn't there, And so people get very indignant. I don't know if they really understand.
Well, sometimes I think we get so myopic in our thinking, so small-minded, that we lose sight of the fact that some very fundamentals, we're all Americans. We all have an obligation. We've all have some kind of unifying factor that unifies us all. It might not even be the same religion, the same politics, the same language, but darn it, it's the same country. And, if you don't think like that, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you can stay here, but this is your country. I mean, you got to have a foundation somewhere in your life. You have to have some element, some focus, some North Star to steer you by. And if you don't have any, I mean, geez, I feel sorry for you.
I think we're the only nation that doesn't make it mandatory for kids to serve at least 2 years in service to their country.
Well, we're not the only one, but we are one of them.
Okay, there's very few. And I really think it's a good idea to have kids, 16, 17, serve their country and learn what patriotism is and learn what they need to contribute to keep making their country free and great.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be military service, because not everybody fit for that as well. I mean, look what happened when they opened it up to females so much. How many broken marriages happened because you have females on a Navy ship for a year? Well, duh, and there's no doubt that there are women that can fly a helicopter and shoot an artillery piece just like me. But it doesn't have to be military service. There can be. I always thought that things like the Peace Corps were a terribly valuable lesson. You got to travel, you got to see other cultures, you got to make a contribution, you learn some skills. It doesn't have to be military, but there should be some. I've often thought that even with my own children, I wish they would have gone in the military first. They didn't. They went to college, but I would have had no problem with them taking a year off after high school and for the same amount of money for a year's tuition at Penn State. Hey, travel, go take odd jobs, learn another language, see how other people have to pee and poop wherever they live, and, get out there, break your mold a little bit and learn. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I really think that it's important that people who are living in a country need to understand how to live within their country and what is necessary for their country to survive. And they should be a part of whatever it takes to keep their country united and to move forward. Even with the COVID thing, it can be done. It just means that you have to spend a little time being involved with it.
Yeah. I manage a cancer center, a small cancer center, and I got to tell you, we've been very concerned because if our staff gets contaminated or gets infected, people aren't going to get cancer care. So back in March, we adopted the policy: treat everybody like they have Ebola. We're gowned, we're gloved. There's no visitors. Anybody has a delivery, they drop it off outside the back door. And I felt sorry for the cancer patients because if we called out to all of them, one way or another. Don't travel. If you need something, let us know. We'll get it for you. But their support people couldn't come in with them, and we're still down to that. We've allowed them to bring one person in, but we had about 20 chairs in the infusion room. We had to cut that in half to give spatial accommodations. So we're still living like that, and it's you just have to adapt. And if it's one thing Americans have been able to do, it's adapt to, you want to throw us a curveball, we'll wait on it and hit it later. We'll see. You don't have to show it to us twice. So I think we just need that kind of unifying concept again. There's people that I'm online with and I see outside and they refuse to wear a mask. And
yes. Or they don't social distance.
I just want to go out from me. That's the purpose of the mask. It's something nobody really wants. Not something we didn't ask for, but it's just there needs to be some unifying concept somewhere along the line in your life. No matter how drab, no matter how powerful you are, there's got to be something that a common thread with all of us. And besides the fact that we all bleed red blood, I think it's our country.
That's right. I agree. Well, I think we're coming to the close, aren't we, Lillian?
Yes, indeed.
Everyone do a few words before we close? How about starting with you, Brian?
Well, I don't know. I think I've said what I wanted to say. I just want to clarify one thing, Bob. When Alexander Haig mistakenly assumed power, that was in 1981 when Reagan was shot. It was
sorry. Thank you. Yes.
George Bush was the commander-in-chief, and George Bush acted admirably at September 11, 2001.
Well, I have a 71-year-old memory, so be nice.
Bob, I'm older than you are, and I was
I'm younger than you by 2 years.
And I realize all of those things. We talked about that before you got here. Things happen when you get to be older.
Yeah, they do. They really do happen. Yeah, but I do.
You kind of remember what you want to remember.
I thought about that with 9/11. Anyway, it would have been appropriate.
What's happening is I used, and this is my excuse. You all know what the word flotsam is?
Yes.
And jetsam.
Yeah, that's the stuff, and jetsam. But flotsam is the stuff that accumulates in a meadow creek after a rainstorm when you're trying to gush through a little bitty thing. I maintain, because I am an old guy, that my mind and our minds get loaded with incidental information, and it comes to little points of flotsam that just jam up in here, and it takes a while for the thing to spin around to come where the reality was for real at that point. Sometimes we confuse things, and I confuse things all the time. Thank you so much for the invitation today, though. I enjoyed being with all of you.
Well, you're very much welcome. We'll be doing more of these, and so just make sure.
Let Bob say a few words. Each one say a few words about being here. Bob, you want to give a few words before we leave?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for doing this and participating, and we need more of this kind of thing. And I shared it with a bunch of my Marine Corps League buddies and some of my Vietnam buddies as soon as I learned about it this morning and last night. So hopefully it'll grow. Great idea. Thank you.
Yes, we're doing. Betsy, you want to say something?
Yes, it was nice meeting you, Bob and Brian.
Thank you.
See. And thank you for your service to your country. I really admire you guys. And, we should never forget 9/11. We shouldn't forget the Holocaust and how hate really divides people. Mm-hmm. We're all the same. We might have different opinions, but we need to be kind to each other. Yeah. And I just want to thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad you're all right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's up to you, Lillian, to shut it down.
Thank you very much. Brian, Bob, should you want to contact me to do something like this again, the email is LSC, all little letters, at passionateworldtalkradio.com. And for everybody else who's listening, thank you very much for joining us. I hope that this helps you remember a little bit and puts a spark in your patriotism. And to remember that without the right you are given freely here in the United States, you would not have the right to quarrel with somebody who politically disagrees with you. You would not have the right to speak your mind. You would not have a right to a lot of the rights that you please take for granted. So go read the Constitution to remind yourself what you do have. And pass it along to your daughter so we don't lose the vote. Thank you all very much for listening. You can hear this all over again at https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Menu, right-hand side of the page, look for 9/11 Memorial, and you're in like Flynn. You can also see it on youtube.com/PWR Network, _PW Talk Radio, and Facebook.com/Lillian Cauldwell 35. And you can hear the audio on iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, and Twitter, and all the other social media. And should you have any questions for future forums like this, please contact JW, small letters, at passionateworldtalkradio.com, and we'll put something together for you. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
God bless America.
Bye.
Thank you.